Alright guys, in this video we're going to work on the menu button and all that stuff, but first of all I want to make a git commit because I forgot in the last video, and that's the problem with using git in videos. I always forget because I'm just consumed with teaching and what we're doing and talking that I forget to do my commits, so it's not going to be the most organized git process. But let's just go to another terminal here and we'll clear this out, and I'm just going to add everything. So I'm going to say git add all, and let's say git commit -m, and we'll say index markup and main sass. All right, so let's move on. We'll go back to the other terminal here, and let's make this smaller. So for the menu, we're going to have our own SCSS file for the menu because there's going to be quite a bit of Sass. So let's create a new file here called _menu.scss. And then we want to, of course, bring that into the main SCSS. So let's do import menu like that. All right, and let's see what we're going to do first here. So we want to kind of build out the button. Like I said, it's going to be purely CSS. So in the menu file, let's say menu button has a class of menu-btn, and we want to position it absolute because we want to say exactly where we want it to be, which is going to be over in the corner. And I also want it to always be on top. I'm going to give it a z index of 3, so I want it to be very close to the front. And then from the right, I'm going to say I want it 35 pixels, and also from the top, we'll do 35 pixels. And then when we hover over it, we should have a pointer, so we're going to say cursor pointer, and I want to give it that transition, that ease out mix-in, so that it transitions all of its properties. So we'll say at include, and let's say ease out like that. Actually, let me check something here. Yeah, make sure the menu is after the config. So if I save that, we're not going to see any difference here because the menu button has nothing in it except a couple divs, and those divs have the class of btn line, so that's what we want to style next. So within the class of menu button, let's create the btn-line styling. So I'm going to give it a width of 28 pixels, and let's give it a height of 3 pixels. Remember, this is each line. Okay, so if we look at the final project, each of these lines is this btn line. So 28 pixels wide, 3 pixels in height. And we want margin, which is going to be the space in between. So I only want margin on the bottom, so we're going to do top 0, top, right, bottom will be 5 pixels, left 0. And let's set the background to white. And then let's also include ease out on this. So I want to say at include ease out. And let's save. What is going on here? Why is this? Is that saving? All right, am I having an issue with Node? Let me restart Node Sass. If you guys aren't seeing any changes or anything, just go ahead and stop this with Control C, and then let's run npm run sass again. What is going on? We should be seeing it. We imported menu. Why are we not seeing it? Let's resave this. So just save. There we go. All right, so now it's showing up. So I guess because it's a partial and we included it, for some reason it wasn't updating. So if you're not seeing it, just reset your npm run sas and then resave the file. So now we have our button over here. Obviously it's not going to do anything. We haven't added in any effects to it or anything yet, and we're going to have to use JavaScript for that. And we're going to get into the JavaScript because I want you to look at the final project, and let's look at the Elements tab in the Dev Tools. All right, so we want to check out, let's see, the menu button class, and then the nav class menu and all this stuff in between. Now watch down here what happens when I click the button. See that? The close class gets added here on the menu button, and then all of this other stuff gets the class of show. And when I click it again, that stuff goes away. So that's what controls this whole thing here. So we're going to have to use JavaScript to be able to make that happen. So let's go ahead and open up our JS. Inside the dist, we want the JS and then the main.js file. And I'm just going to close that up and make this smaller. So we want to select items from the DOM. So let's say select DOM items. And by the DOM, I mean the document object model, which is basically like the UI structure, all the HTML tags, the attributes, all that stuff. So we want the menu button, we want the entire menu overlay, the nav list or the nav items, we want the branding, all that stuff. So let's say const, we'll create a variable called menu btn and set that to document. We're going to use the document property here, and there's a method called query selector, which will do just that. It'll select whatever we put in here. We want to select the class of btn-menu. Okay, so query selector works just like jQuery in terms of selection. You can use classes or IDs or just elements, whatever you want, any kind of selector. And then let's just copy this down a couple times. And we also want the menu itself. So create a variable of menu, grab the class of menu. We want, let's see, what else do we have? Let's look at our index. So we got the menu button, we got the menu. We also want the branding, the menu nav, and then each nav item. Those should all be in variables. So here, let's do menu nav, which is the UL. So it has a class of menu-nav, and we want the menu branding. So that has a class of menu branding. Okay, now for the nav items, and what I'm talking about is, let's go over here, is each of these items here, each of these links. Now, since there's more than one, we can't use query selector because that will just grab the first one. So we need to use something called query selector all, which will take all of those elements and put them into something called a node list, which is similar to an array. So let's call this nav items and set it to document.query selector all this time. And we want the class of nav-items. Okay. So that's our DOM selection. Now what we want to do is set the initial state of the menu. So what I mean is the overlay, this right here. We're going to create a variable that represents if it's open or closed, but it will be set to true or false. So this will be true, and then if it's closed, that's false. We obviously want it false by default. So let's say let show menu, and let's set that to false. And I'm using let because we want to directly reassign this at certain times, and you can't do that with const. Const is for a constant. So now we need an event listener, because when we click this, that's when we want stuff to happen, right? So we're going to say menu button, which we defined above. We're going to add an event listener onto it. We want to listen for a click event, and then once we click, we want a function to fire off called toggle menu, which we need to create. So let's say function toggle menu, and we first of all want to check the state of show menu. We want to see if it's false. So if not, that's what the exclamation is, not, show menu, and then let's put an else here as well. So if the menu is not shown, meaning that overlay, this overlay right here is not shown, so this state here, then when we click this, we want it to be shown, right? So we want to add those show classes. We also want to add the close class to the button, because that's what we're gonna use to make the X, to make that X form. So let's first of all take the menu btn, and in vanilla JavaScript we can easily add a class by doing .class list.add, not ass, not ass. We want class list.add, and we want to put in the close class. Okay, so we're going to add the close class, and then we can just copy this down. So this one here will be menu, and for menu we want to add the show class. Okay, everything else gets show. The only thing that is the close class is the menu button. So show and show. So we want menu. We also want the menu nav to get that as well. So menu nav class, and also the menu branding. So menu branding, add show. Now the nav links is a little different, because the nav links, there's more than one, and up here we use query select all. So the way that we need to handle this is we need to loop through all of the items and then add the show class to each one. So we'll take nav items, right? And actually I messed this up here. See how I did class nav items? They actually have, if we look, the class of nav items singular. So it won't work. We need to change that to nav item. So nav items, we're going to use a for each here, which is a high order array method. And we just pass in a variable that we want to represent each item. And then I'm going to use an arrow function here, and I'm going to take that item for each one, and then I'm going to say class list dot add and show. Okay, so for each nav item we want to add the show class. All right, now else, we actually, before we go into else, we just want to reset the menu state. So now show menu should be equal to true, okay, because now it should be open. Now we want to do the same, we want to do this the opposite of exactly what we did here in the else. Okay, so basically if the menu is shown and we click it, we then want to remove all these classes. So remove, classless remove. I'm just going to highlight this add and do Control D, 1, 2, 3, to select all those, and then say remove. Okay, and then we just want to set this back to false. And that should be it. That should be all the JavaScript we need. So let's test it out. Let's open up our dev tools here, go to our elements, go to the header. We want to see the menu button. Actually, we can leave that closed, but we want to see everything in here and make sure that the menu button gets the close class and then everything else gets show. So let's go ahead and click. And nothing happens. Cannot read add event listener. No. What? Oh, this should be menu button. Menu button. All right, let's try it again. Let's go back to elements. Check this stuff out, and let's click. And there we go. We get close added to the menu button, and then everything else gets the show class. Now, if I click it again, that stuff should get removed. Let's click it again, and now it's gone. All right, so that's the JavaScript. Now, obviously, that doesn't do anything in the UI. That just handles that DOM manipulation. To handle the UI, we need to use Sass or CSS. So I think what we'll do now, I don't think we'll be able to fit the whole overlay and the button transition and stuff like that in this video, but let's at least take care of this where how it turns into an X and back. So let's do that. Now, remember, when we click, this gets the class of close. So that's what we want to style. So that's part of the menu button. So we want to go within this dot menu button in the Sass, and go down here, make sure you're not within the button line, but outside of it, but still in menu button. And then let's put a comment here and we'll say rotate rotate into X with menu lines. So let's say ampersand dot close, because now we're styling the menu button when it has the class of close, right? So when it's clicked, and we want to say transform. We want to rotate it, right? So we want to rotate, and then here we can put a degrees. We can put 180 degrees. Okay, now if I save that, and let's see what happens when I click, it just rotates like that. Okay, so that's part of it. Now we need to deal with each line, because each line we need to basically reposition. The second line we're actually going to get rid of, and we're going to take the top and bottom and make an X with it. So it's actually kind of cool. So let's go down here and let's say dot btn dash line, okay, because we want to deal with the button lines. And we want to basically select each one, and we can use a pseudo selector called nth child to select each one. So let's say line 1. Line 1 is going to rotate. Let's say line 2. We're going to hide line 2, and then line 3 is also gonna rotate. All right, so let's handle the second one. Actually, no, let's just go ahead and start here. So we're gonna say ampersand colon nth dash child, and we want the first line, so we put in a 1 here. Okay, and just to show you this works, we'll say, let's change the background color. So we'll say background red and save. Now if I click this, notice that the top line, it does the rotation, and the top line turns to red when the close class is added. Okay, when I go back, it goes away. So what we want this to do is just rotate and make it go in a diagonal fashion. So we can use transform rotate, and then we use translate to kind of position it. And you can look up these properties like CSS. Let's say transform, and the Mozilla site is really good for this. So right here. All right, so, and it gives you an example. Do you see that? Transform, let's say 1.5. See how it changes? So you can transform, you can translate, which repositions it, and we can put this wherever we want. If we change this to, and this is X and Y values, if we put 100, it moves over. If we put 0, moves over. So translate just repositions it, and then rotate turns it. So we want to use a combination of those to create this effect. So let's get rid of this. Obviously, we don't want that. And we'll do transform. Let's say rotate. We want to rotate 45 degrees, because remember we're making an X. And then we want to translate, which will just kind of reposition it to 5 pixels, 5 pixels. All right, let's save that and see what we get. So if we click, there we go. So the first line, you can see, has repositioned itself using rotate and translate. Okay, so that's what we want for that line. The second line, we want to completely hide. So I'm going to copy this and change this to 2, because that's going to grab the second line, and we're simply going to change the opacity to 0, which will just basically just make it go away. It'll hide it. All right, so let's save that. Let's try it, and there we go. So the second line is now hidden. Now we want to deal with the last one, and we want to make that one go this way. Okay, so let's copy this, and let's go down here and paste that in. We'll change this to 3, because we're working on the third line. This time we want to rotate -45. We want it to go the other way. And then we're going to change the translate position to 7 and then -6. Okay, and it took me a little while messing around with these values to get it to look like an X, but that's what I came up with. So let's save. Let's go over and click, and there we go. So now each line has, the middle one is gone, and then the top one is going this way, and the bottom one is going this way. So CSS transitions are very, very powerful. Okay, you can do a lot in terms of animation and stuff, especially, you know, you have to add a little bit of JavaScript so that you can add and remove classes and stuff like that, but I think that's a pretty cool effect. And I think that X looks good, but if you want to try to reposition it a little, you can do that. You can mess with the values. You can make it thicker. Whatever you want to do is fine. But I think we're going to end the video here, guys, and in the next one, we're going to work on the overlay. So we want to work on this whole part here. Okay, before we do that though, let's go ahead and do our commit. So let's go to this terminal here and we'll say git add all, git commit, and let's do -m. And what did we do here? We did the menu button, we did the JavaScript, and we did the rotate. I will say, menu button, JavaScript, and rotate. All right, good. All right, so that's it, guys. I will see you in the next video where we'll start to create the overlay.